Can Zeke return to form? ADP buys and sells in round 3. And also a little Gronk retirement talk starting right now on the Razzball Fantasy Football Podcast. Welcome back, folks, to another episode of the Razzball Fantasy Football Podcast. I'm your host, Bobby LaMarco. Here we're talking today about some players that can make or break your fantasy teams in rounds 3 and 4. A little buy, sell, a little Zeke talk. But before we get into all that, we want to make sure you're following us across the board. Make sure you're following Razzball Fantasy. We're up over 600 subscribers. We're trying to get to 1,000 so we can produce those Sunday live shows. We'll have a teaser for that later in the summer. But make sure you're also following us on IG and TikTok at Razzball Fantasy. And make sure you're going to Razzball.com. Not only does Razzball.com have great articles for baseball, basketball, hockey, and football, but now on the football side, we have ADP data, 6 different sites all in one place. We have consensus rankings from 8 different great sites as well, including Razzball. And make sure you're checking out the Trade Analyzer. We also have a team name generator that'll have 2022 rookie names in there very shortly. So make sure you come up with a clever name. If you need help, come to Razzball.com. All right, let's bring in my co-host for today, my longtime colleague, Sky Guasco. What's going on, buddy?
Happy to be back, Bob. Had a nice week off last week. Got some R&R, which is much appreciated. I'm terrible at taking off time. I'm really good and bad at self-care. And I'm 35 years old, Bob. I've been working full time since I was 15. I have never taken a full week off of work in my entire life until last week, and it was life-changing. Absolutely fantastic backpacking trip. Got some time with the Pops for Father's Day. I am recouped and ready to go.
Let's do it, man. First off, today's show will be about some players that are going to make or break your fantasy teams in rounds 3 and 4. Before we do that, we got a shout out today. Breaking news, Rob Gronkowski retires. What is your first thoughts, Sky, on Rob Gronkowski retiring for the player and also the fallout for the fantasy team?
Well, first thing is this real? Shouts out to Gronk. Incredible career. Definitely a first ballot Hall of Famer. I would imagine unanimous. 4-time Super Bowl champion. Of course, 3 with the Patriots, 1 with the Bucks, all with Brady. 4-time first-team All-Pro, 5-team Pro Bowler, 3rd most touchdowns by a tight end all-time, 92. Most 100-yard receiving games by a tight end with 32. If he does actually stay out, then it's been a hell of a career. But, mid-season playoffs, maybe he comes back for another run with Brady. We'll see what happens. As far as the fallout for Brady, yes, it's an impact because Gronk's his boy. But I do think, Cameron Brate's still there. They could take another option. Although O.J. Howard is no longer there. So we'll see who fills the gap. Chris Godwin, kind of spoiler alert on this program when we get going. Chris Godwin was going to be a player I fade in the 3rd and 4th round until Gronk retired. And then it was kind of like, well, now there's a huge hole, so I got to go with it here. But Chris Godwin's going to be out potentially a handful of weeks. Gronk's no longer there. Run game. It's going to be a lot of Mike Evans, which I'm excited about. But I think Brady is going to be just fine. Hell of a career from Gronk, though. Definitely a Hall of Famer.
Nice segue into, Chris Godwin's ADP. Let's see. Let's use that Razzball Fantasy Football. Let me just take down that overlay. Sorry, folks. Let's use that Razzball.com ADP to check out some of the latest Tampa Bay Bucks ADPs. Now with Gronk at least for now gone, the question comes, where are all these guys going? And there's not a lot of sites that offer this opportunity to do this. So make sure you're going to Razzball.com to check out the ADP because you actually can search by team in our search engine. And bam, you get everybody on the Tampa Bay Bucks. So currently today in our consensus, Leonard Fournette's going at 23. Got Mike Evans right behind him at 25. Godwin is slipped all the way to 58. So people are hearing you, Sky, about fading him in the 3rd, 4th round. But then you start getting Tom Brady at 75, Russell Gage at 110, and then Rashad White at 135. Not pictured here, though, will probably Cameron Brate is a sleeper. He probably won't even get close to that 120. So first thought, Sky, which one are you buying out of this group?
Oh, Russell Gage. It's not even close. I think he played a hell of a season last year, filling in for Calvin, of course, after 5 games, Calvin Ridley goes down and then he's out, of course, suspended. But with a terrible Falcons offense, frankly, Russell Gage played quite well, had been doing so as kind of a third, fourth option. That offense for a while last year took a big step up down the stretch. Now he gets Tom Brady. Again, a lot of those weapons from last year gone. Gronk gone, Godwin gone for a while. AB, of course, out as well. OJ Howard not around. Ronald Jones not around. I think Russell Gage has an opportunity to be the number 2 while Godwin's gone, and maybe even a number 3 if he can get that rapport. So right now, as it stands, I think the ADP will shift eventually depending on Godwin, but right now, easily, it's Russell Gage.
I'm going to actually go Leonard Fournette, and here's why. There is a direct correlation between tight end and running back targets, and if Gronk, I don't see Cameron Brate necessarily demanding as many targets as Gronk does. I think that might actually trickle down to somewhat to Leonard Fournette in the passing game just a little bit. So I actually do think Leonard Fournette, to me, at this point, if you have a top 3 pick in the draft and you're able to get Fournette and another player we're going to talk about today at the turn, I think you're going to just be aces at running back all season long. So I'm actually going to go Leonard Fournette. Let's get into it, though. That's our Gronk talk for today right now. But Sky, let's talk a little bit about why we're actually here. Why we're actually here is to talk about some of the players that can make or break your fantasy team in the 3rd and 4th round. So I actually tasked you to find us one player that can make your team and one player that could break your team. So let's start with the makes. Let's start on a positive note. Who's the player in these rounds that can make your fantasy team in 2022?
Man, really polarizing player, and I understand why, but for me, it's not a question. It's going to be Zeke Elliott. Look, this guy's a perennial, top 5 pick until last year, certainly a first rounder. I understand he's getting old, quote unquote, but folks, let's take a sober look here at Zeke Elliott, all right? He's 26 years old. And we know that running backs are like cast out to the pasture at 24. It's dumb. But he's 26. He's not 29. He's not hitting 30. All right. He's not 28 with injury history. He had torn PCL last year in week 4, week 5, played through it, didn't want to get surgery. Still, with Tony Pollard on his back and injured, he still had about 1,000 plus yards and 12 touchdowns. Anybody that's going to give you double-digit touchdowns and has the chance to get you 1,000 plus rushing yards and total yards is going to want to be on my fantasy team. He can also catch the ball quite well. Yes, I understand Tony Pollard is coming up from the rear and he will take over this backfield maybe as quickly as the second half of the season or next year. But Zeke Elliott is going to start as the bell cow unless he comes in not healthy. As of right now, according to Mike McCarthy, the head coach, he is healthy right now. That's what we care about on draft day. If that's the case, man, you're getting somebody with weekly top 10, top 5 upside. Zeke seems to be healthy. Yes, they lose Amari Cooper, but they have CeeDee Lamb coming in. Dak, another year removed off of that injury. Dalton Schultz, and another step forward. Some rookies, like it a lot. Maybe they split the backfield a little bit, but Zeke Elliott has never averaged less than 22 touches per game as a Dallas Cowboy. That's immense workload. I get it. It could catch up with him, but I don't think it happens in the first month, the second month, or even the season if he can stay healthy. Yes, Tony Pollard will get more work, but we're talking about a 3rd, 4th round running back all of a sudden, Bob, not a top 5 pick. So for this price, it's not even a question to me. Zeke Elliott's upside, at least for 4-6 games, is absolutely what I'm looking for. People were thinking about this with James Conner last year, and it worked out, right? And now he's back with some good graces. Think of, if you think of Zeke Elliott as a high-end RB2, then this is a steal. If you're thinking of Zeke as a top 5 pick, it's still kind of hard to comprehend. For me, it's no problem. Last point. People are, I think, open to going Nick Chubb in maybe the 2nd round and Kareem Hunt in like the 5th, 6th, okay? This is a cheaper version of that with Zeke Elliott in the 4th and Tony Pollard in the 8th. I'll take that round. Less risk, similar upside. I'll take Zeke in the 4th round all day long.
Quick yes or no answer. Zeke Elliott's top ADP right now is on Sleeper. He's going 30th overall. You taking him there?
That's the middle of 3rd round. No, that's a little rich.
All right, got you. All right, let's jump into my guy for Bob's make, and that's going to be James Conner. James Conner right now today. So I'm just going to run through some quick numbers for you. James Conner last year finished with 17.2 points per game in PPR. By the way, Sky, congratulations. I have officially converted to PPR full.
Let's go.
So my analysis said, yeah, baby, let's happen it, right?
About time.
Yeah, woo. Feels good. I feel dirty a little. Sorry, standard people. You've officially been shunned. So that ended up being the RB9 in fantasy last year. Current today, his ADP is RB15. He's going 30th overall. So when you're looking at this stuff right now, I'm thinking, okay, obviously he signs with the team, no more Chase Edmonds. And there's a little bit of hesitation, I guess, because he's injury risk. But I don't care. And here is why. The first people I think people are going to talk about is James Conner's regression for touchdowns. And yes, he averaged 31.4 points over expectation based on his career averages in the red zone. So even if you take those points away, he would have had 15.2 points per game. That's RB16. Like I just told you, he's being drafted at RB15. But that's based on his entire season. Let's take a deep dive into James Conner's production with and without Chase Edmonds. 9 games with Edmonds, he averaged 11.2 PPR points per game. In 6 games without Edmonds, he averaged 26.1 PPR points per game. Okay? That's not even that is utterly that's absurd. That's better than JT. That's like on par with CMC last year, 2 years ago, essentially, or 3 years ago, my apologies. But absurd. Upside. And I'm still thinking in my head, okay, 26.1. Sure, his production for touchdowns was insane during that time period. Let's shave off 2 points per game. He's still better than pretty much every running back in fantasy last year, not named JT or Derrick Henry in PPR points per game. So I honestly just think at this point, we're overthinking it. 4 of the 5 starters on the offensive line are returning, and they brought in Willie Hernandez, who's a guard from the Giants, to compete for the other guard spot. They were middle of the pack last year. Kyler Murray will be back healthy this season, should only make the offense better, plus a target hog in the red zone. His name's DeAndre Hopkins, suspended for the first 6 weeks. That might open up more opportunities for another guy who's dominant in the red zone, James Conner. So I am going all in at the turn. His highest ADP right now is 22. I accept. I click yes to that as well. That's it for me on James Conner. Let's dive into some of our breaks. So, Sky, you have a break on your list. Who's your fantasy player that will break your fantasy team in 2022?
Yeah, I hate to do this, man. I know you're a big fan, and so am I, frankly. But when you look at the wide receivers in the 3rd, 4th round and all the talent there, maybe even a tight end, early quarterback, if you want to put those in the mix, and some of these later upside running backs, Deontay Johnson, unfortunately for me, falls outside of that group. Now, I dive into his stats last year, and they're actually quite impressive. Again, with an aging Big Ben on his way out, I get it, right? 2nd in the NFL with 169 targets. He was 5th in receptions at 107, but his yards per catch at 10.9, and he had receiving yards of 1,100, were lower amongst wide receivers. He also only had 3 total games of 100-yard receiving efforts. And for me right now, he's going as the wide receiver 14 and 34th overall, and that's just too rich for me. I mean, there's a lot of other players. My guy that is outside of the top 3 or 4 rounds, I would take above Deontay Johnson, and right now he's going about 2 rounds later. Here's the thing. I know Big Ben was struggling. I know that Mitch Trubisky might have a second round after having a year with Brian Dable. I want to see that. I hope Mitch can work out. Former number 2 overall pick, of course. And then I like Kenny Pickett a lot. We talked about him early on in the program with DT. I like the options there, but the Steelers have been number 1 over the last 3 years in average passing attempts per game. Last year, they were number 4. I don't see it continuing. Najee Harris is here to stay. He's going to get a lot of work. They're going to try to protect Mitch Trubisky or Kenny Pickett. I think they're going to drop into the middle of the pack in passing attempts per game, trying to, contain an offensive line, play more defense, in a better division overall with Lamar Jackson coming back, the Bengals getting better, and maybe Deshaun Watson. So for me, Deontay Johnson is somebody that's going to soak up targets. He's obviously the clear number 1, but Pat Fruth is out there. My boy George Pickens is out there. Calvin Austin, also a rookie, gets picked up. Chase Claypool claiming he's a top 3 pick in the NFL, Bob. Najee Harris also 94 targets out of the backfield last year. There's just too many mouths to feed for Deontay Johnson to be the wide receiver 8 again this year. And I think we're drafting him thinking it would happen. Big Ben was not athletically still ready to go in the pros last year. One thing, though, that he did have that I don't think Mitch Trubisky has, and Kenny Pickett certainly does not yet at the pro level, was the mentals of the game. And they had a lock on like Rodgers and Adams, if you will. I just don't see that happening as consistently with either one of these quarterbacks. So I don't hate Deontay Johnson, but in the 3rd, 4th round, 34th overall, I'm not going to be taking him there.
So I actually did have Deontay Johnson as my runner-up. I was actually going to talk about him too. I think a lot of people are also forgetting the scramble factor of Mitch Trubisky. If he is the starter, that's going to bring down more pass volume. This was insanely pass-happy offense, so I do agree with that one a lot. Let's jump to mine. Mine's Jalen Waddle. Now I'm going to throw some numbers at you. You're going to like them or not like them. Don't care anymore. All right, folks, listen up. Last year finished with 15.5 points per game in PPR. Awesome. Finished as the wide receiver 15. He's being drafted this year as the wide receiver 13. Okay, second-year leap, second-year player, obviously. Well, there's a huge problem with that. There's a man named Tyreek Hill now on the team. There's also a new offensive coordinator on the team, or head coach, play caller. His name is Mike McDaniel. The thing is, Shanahan's are awesome play callers. They are probably the best play callers in the NFL. But one thing they are not is pass happy. So I decided to look at Jalen Waddle's second half of the year because he did get stronger. So a lot of people say second half rookies, buy him. That's a fact. His numbers did go up to 17.7 points per game in PPR. It just top 10. You start looking at his points per snap and points per opportunity, it'll be more eye-opening. Wide receiver 14 over that time frame in points per snap, wide receiver 15 in points per opportunity. So right there when you're looking at it, he was more of a mid-range wide receiver 2, even when his production was elite on a per-snap basis. Why is that important? Well, because San Francisco did not throw the ball a lot, so you're going to see that volume coming down. Plus, when you have points per opportunity at wide receiver 58 and there's less opportunities, it's going to be tougher to produce elite top 13 wide receiver numbers. So if Tyreek Hill's the 1, what's that mean for the number 2? In San Francisco, the average points per game for the number 2 receiver on the team, 9.4 points per game in PPR. Last 2 years between Ayuk and Deebo Samuel, the number 2, 11.1 points per game. That's nowhere near top 15 numbers. So, Bob, what do you mean? George Kittle was obviously the top option. Okay, touche. The second option in the offense averaged 15.2 points per game with George Kittle over the last 4 years. That would have been the wide receiver 18. So my point is here, number 1, Mike Gesicki will be involved. You also have a pass-catching running back in Chase Edmonds. I do think that Cedric Wilson will demand some level of targets in this offense. My problem, though, is I think you're drafting him at a ceiling at wide receiver 13. So that is all risk, in my opinion. So that's why I'm going to fade Jalen Waddle, and I will pivot to other players like we just talked about on the show today, like James Conner and Zeke Elliott. All right, folks, that's all we got for today. We do really appreciate your time. Once again, this is the Razzball Fantasy Football Podcast. Make sure you're following us. Make sure you're following that man, Sky Guasco, at Sky Guasco on Twitter. But also make sure you're checking out his latest article. Sky, before I kick you off the camera, you have anything brewing on the article side for Razzball?
Yeah, I'm actually looking forward to getting into some off-script things. One article I'm looking forward to dropping here pretty quickly is players to not forget about. Every single year we get burned by injuries, we get burned by suspensions, we get burned by old guys who get taken over, but then they come back. Zeke Elliott, I already had mentioned, spoiler alert, might be in the article. Certain guy, Adam Thielen's a guy that comes to mind. Don't forget about these stalwarts in fantasy football who are not done yet. They could help and be values in your fantasy drafts.
Make sure you're following Razzball Fantasy YouTube on Razzball Fantasy, also TikTok and IG. Make sure you're going to Razzball.com for all the greatest information you need to win your fantasy leagues. Once again, I'm your host, Bobby LaMarco. That man, Sky Guasco. That's it, folks. We're out of here.